Fiction Friday, and today we're continuing Chapter 5 in our ongoing book, Lad, a Dog, by Albert Payson Terhune. Lad has been entered in a dog show in New York City, and he's about to enter Madison Square Garden where the big event will take place. Let's see what happens next to him, okay? As always, the link to the ebook is in the description below if you want to read along. Chapter 5, Part 3, For a Bit of Ribbon. Through a doorway they went. At a wicket, a yawning veterinarian glanced uninterestedly at Lad. As the dog had no outward and glaring signs of disease, the vet did not so much as touch him, but with a nod suffered him to pass. The vet was paid to inspect all dogs as they entered the show. Perhaps some of them were turned back by him, perhaps not. But after this, as after many another shows, scores of kennels were swept by distemper and by other canine maladies. Scores of deaths followed. That is one of the risks a dog exhibitor must take, or rather that his luckless dogs must take, in spite of the fees paid to yawning veterinaries to bar out sick entrants. As Lad passed in through the doorway, he halted involuntarily in dismay. Dogs! 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 More than 2,000 of them, from Great Dane to Toy Terrier, benched in row after row throughout the vast floor space of the garden. Lad had never known there were so many dogs on earth. Fully 500 of them were barking or howling. The hideous volume of sound swelled to the garden's vaulted roof and echoed back again like innumerable hammer blows upon the eardrum. The mistress stood holding Lad's chain and softly caressing the bewildered dog, while the master went to make inquiries. Lad pressed his shaggy body closer to her knee for refuge as he gazed blinkingly around him. In the garden's center were several large enclosures of wire and reddish wood. Inside each enclosure were a table, a chair, and a movable platform. The platform was some 6 inches high and 4 feet square. At corners of these judging rings were blackboards on which the classes next to be inspected were chalked up. All around the central space were alleys, on each side of which were lines of raised benches, 2 feet from the ground. The benches were carpeted with straw and were divided off by high wire partitions into compartments about 3 feet in area. Each compartment was to be the abiding place of some unfortunate dog for the next 4 days and nights. By short chains, the dogs were bound into these open-fronted cells. The chains left their wearers just leeway enough to stand up or lie down, or to move to the various limits of the tiny space. In front of some of the compartments, a wire barrier was fastened. This meant that the occupant was savage. In other words, that under the 4-day strain he was likely to resent the stares or pokes or ticklings or promiscuous alien pattings of 50,000 curious visitors. The master came back with a plumply tipped attendant. Lad was conducted through a babel of yapping and snapping thoroughbreds of all breeds to a section at the garden's northeast corner, above which, in large black letters on a white sign, was inscribed Collies. Here his conductor stopped before a compartment numbered 658. "Up, laddie," said the mistress, touching the straw-carpeted bench. Usually at this command, Lad was wont to spring to the indicated height, whether car floor or tabletop, with the lightness of a cat. Now, 1 foot after another, he very slowly climbed into the compartment he was already beginning to detest. The cell which was planned to be his only resting spot for 4 interminable days. There, he, who had never been tied, was ignominiously chained as though he were a runaway puppy. The insult bit to the depths of his sore soul. He curled down in the straw. The mistress made him as comfortable as she could. She set before him the breakfast she had brought and told the attendant to bring some water. The master, meantime, had met a collie man whom he knew, and in company with this acquaintance he was walking along the collie section, examining the dogs tied there. A dozen times had the master visited dog shows, but now that Lad was on the exhibition, he studied the other collies with new eyes. "Look," he said boastfully to his companion, pausing before a bench whereon were chained half a dozen dogs from a single illustrious kennel. "These fellows aren't in it with old Lad. See, their noses are tapered like toothpicks, and the span of their heads between the ears isn't as wide as my palm. And their eyes are little, and they slant like a Chinaman's, and their bodies are as curved as a greyhound's. Compared with Lad, some of them are freaks. That's all they are, just freaks. Not all of them, of course, but a lot of them." "That's the idea nowadays," laughed the collie man patronizingly. "The up-to-date collie, this year's style at least, is bred with a borzoi, or wolfhound, head and a graceful small bones. What's the use of his having a brain and scenting power? He's used for exhibition, or kept as a pet nowadays, not to herd sheep. Long nose, narrow head." "But Lad once tracked my footsteps 2 miles through a snowstorm," bragged the master, "and again on a road where 50 people had walked since I had, and he understands the meaning of every simple word. He—" "Yes," said the collie man, quite unimpressed. "Very interesting, but not useful in a show. Some of the big exhibitors still care for sense in their dogs, and they make companions of them. Eileen Moretta, for instance, and Fred Layton, and 1 or 2 more. But I find most of the rest are just out for the prizes. Let's have a look at your dog. Where is he?" On the way down the alley towards cell 658, they met the worried mistress. "Lad won't eat a thing," she reported, "and he wouldn't eat before we left home this morning either. He drinks plenty of water, but he won't eat. I'm afraid he's sick." "They hardly ever eat at a show," the collie man consoled her. "Hardly a mouthful. Most of the high-strung ones. But they drink quarts of water. This is your dog, hey?" he broke off, pausing at 658. He stood, legs apart, hands behind his back, gazing down at Lad. The dog was lying, head between paws, as before. He did not so much as glance up at the stranger, but his great wistful eyes roved from the mistress to the master and back again. In all this horrible place, they two alone were his salvation. Repeated the collie man thoroughly. "Eyes too big and not enough slanted. Head too thick for the neck or the nose. Ears too far apart. Eyes too far apart, too. Not enough terrier expression in them. Too much bone, too much bulk. Wonderful coat, though. Glorious coat. Best coat I've seen this 5 years. Great brush, too. What's he entered for? Novice, hey? May get a 3rd with him at that. He's the true type, but old-fashioned. I'm afraid he's too old-fashioned for such a fast company as he's in. Still, you never can tell. Only it's a pity he isn't a little more—" "I wouldn't have him change one little bit in any way," flashed the mistress. "He's perfect as he is. You can't see that, though, because he isn't himself now. I've never seen him so crushed and woebegone. I wish we had never brought him here." "Aw, poor Lad. He isn't his usual spirited self at all in this doggy mayhem. I do hope he perks up, or gets to go home soon. That would be even better. There's no place like home, am I right? It's a shame all those other collie dogs were bred for specific looks just to win dog shows, and not good dog traits just to be a good and well-rounded doggy. I'm glad I'm not in dog shows, and I'm sure Lad's masters are regretting putting him in this one right now. But we'll have to wait until our next Fiction Friday story time to see what happens to Lad. Be sure to subscribe and come back on Monday for our next Music Monday song, and on Wednesday for the next animal in our Chinese Zodiac Wiki series. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Bye!